everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am finally back into doing the monthly recommendations videos. In case you guys didn't know, this is a Goodreads group called Monthly Recommendations. I will leave it linked down below, but it's basically a group that comes up with a theme every month that people can recommend books for, and you can leave your link in their group post thing so you can get a whole bunch of really good recommendations if you're looking for a specific type of book. So this month's theme is science fiction, which I thought was a genre that I did not read that much of, but as I was going through books, I realized that I have read quite a lot and somewhat recently, so maybe it's a new genre that I am dabbling in and experimenting in and really enjoying. So normally for these recommendations, I try and break it up in between middle grade YA and adult. I don't really have that many middle grade books to recommend. I have one that can fall into all three of these, but for that reason, I don't really have a middle grade category, so I'm just gonna jump right into YA recommendations. So the first book that I have to recommend is actually the most recent book that I just finished, and that is Starflight by Melissa Landers. This was just such a fun book. Okay, picture Firefly meets These Broken Stars meets The Lunar Chronicles, and you have this book. I just loved it. It was so fun. It's described as a girl who is trying to kind of stow away on a ship to escape her criminal identity. I would not describe it that way at all. I just think it was so fun. It really reminded me of Firefly, the crew that she's with, and kind of the feel of it, where Firefly, in case you haven't watched the show, is kind of like a Western meets science fiction and space travel. This one is kind of like Pirates meets space travel. I just thought it was so good. It was so fun and enjoyable, so I'm gonna highly recommend this book. The next book that I have to recommend is not what I would really consider science fiction, but it definitely falls into that category, but less of the space travel and more of the really messed up science and medicine and aliens type of science fiction, and that is Grasshopper Jungle by Andrew Smith. This book was just so weird and glorious. This is about a really small town in, I want to say, Iowa, that gets invaded by super huge mutant indestructible grasshopper things. It follows a boy and his friends and his bizarre teenager horny thoughts, which is kind of the underlying dialogue of this whole book, which I thought was great because it kind of took away from the science fiction and made it funnier and more like a contemporary. But then the science fiction would just kind of slap you in the face and be like, hey, there's a lot of medicine and science that happened in this town. So I loved this book. I thought it was phenomenally done and is not necessarily kind of a stereotypical sci-fi read, but I would definitely recommend checking it out. And like a lot of people that I'm assuming are going to recommend this book, I'm going to recommend Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This was just such a fun ride of a book. This is definitely more of the space travel, spaceship, space type of sci-fi that you think of, but it's told in such an interesting way. It's told in documents and artwork and pictures and emails. It was just such a cool take on this story, and I really liked it. One of my favorite things in science fiction is AI, so when you introduce that to it, I'm hooked, and I just love this. I can't wait for Gemini to come out next month, and I love this. It was so good. Jumping into adult sci-fi reads, one of the most recent adult sci-fi books that I read recently was Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. And this book is going to be one of my favorite books of this year. I just thought it was phenomenally done. It's pretty much about a girl who, when she was a kid, was riding her bike in the woods and falls into this huge crater in the ground and lands in the palm of a huge metal hand. Fast forward 20 years, she is the scientist who is assigned to this case to figure out what this hand is and if it even came from Earth and where the rest of the body is. It was just so good. I loved it. Highly recommend that book. I also want to recommend Alive by Scott Sigler. This is the first one in his series. I've only read this one, but I just thought it was so enjoyable. It was so fast-paced. It's one of those books where you are in the eyes of the main character who wakes up and has no idea where they are, who the people around them are, and how they got there. So you just kind of have to go on this wild ride. And there are definitely some really interesting sci-fi aspects to the story. I just loved it. You can read it in one sitting. It was great. I'm also going to recommend the Strain series by Chuck Hogan and Guillermo del Toro. This kind of might follow more of a paranormal aspect, but It is definitely very scientific in the vampire-ness that's in there. This book just skeeved me out. It's very much a horror sci-fi read about really messed up vampire stuff that was just so good. Also, there's a show on FX now in case you're curious and don't want to read this, you can watch it. And the last book that I want to recommend is going to fall in all categories. I've seen it shelved in literally all sections in the bookstore, and that is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. This is just a phenomenal sci-fi story that will always be kind of the epitome of sci-fi for me because it was the first dabbling that I had in it, but it was just so good. It's about kind of a child genius who is being trained to lead an army against an alien race, and it is just done so well, and that you can enjoy it no matter what age you are. It is just so good. So this one is going to encompass all of the age ranges. And those are all the books that I have to recommend in the sci-fi genre. I hope that something piqued your interest, and if you're new to sci-fi, these are definitely some good books to get into the genre because they're not very heavy on the science and they're just a really enjoyable story. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys are reading some amazing books, and I'll see you guys next time.